The Holy Gospel of Jesus Christ according to Matthew. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done. Truly, I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." From that time on, these first words of Jesus tell us that we are at a defining moment for he and the disciples. Jesus had talked about it before, but now he just comes out and says it plainly. I've got to go to Jerusalem, and I'm going to suffer, mostly at the hands of the religious elite, and then I'll be killed. But after 3 days, I'll come back. It's a heck of a thing to say out of the blue to a group of your closest friends. But truthfully, they were never going to be ready to hear it. There was this expectation, a deep hope in the hearts of the Jewish people that the Messiah, the Anointed One, would eventually come and be a conquering hero. He would overcome the Roman oppressors and restore the Jews to their rightful place in society, and all would be right with the world again. So when Jesus laid out this plan to the disciples, it was a shock. It wasn't just a weird thing for Jesus to say. He said weird things all the time. It was the very opposite of what they were thinking and hoping would happen. And I don't blame Peter one bit for speaking up. God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. To the disciples, it sounded like Jesus was admitting defeat before the fight had even begun. But the Jesus way was different, more countercultural than they could understand right at that moment. And I'm pretty sure that's still true for the majority of us. Just after Peter and the disciples had their big moment where they were given the authority to proclaim this radical gospel of Christ that takes root where we least expect it and spreads out holy tendrils in all directions, Jesus responds to Peter's objection in a pretty harsh way. "Get behind me, Satan." When you and I hear that, you need to know that what comes to our minds is not what came to Peter's mind. Because of the way our religious imagination has developed over thousands of years, when we hear the word Satan, we think of our idea of the devil, the red guy with horns and a pitchfork. The devil made me do it. That guy. Well, the word that Jesus uses here, Satan, is derived from a Hebrew word, Hasatan, and it means the accuser. Up until the 1st century or so, there was really no common Jewish concept of a personal devil that we have today. And because Jesus and the disciples would have been intimately familiar with the writings of the Old Testament as Jews, they would have thought of the word Satan in completely different terms than we do now. Jesus wasn't calling Peter the devil. Peter meant well. He was all in. But he didn't understand the nature of the destiny of Jesus as the Christ. And that's just what Jesus was pointing out when he said, "You are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." And that brings us to the real meat of the message. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Now, there was no confusion this time in the minds of the disciples. They knew exactly what he was referring to. Crucifixion was a really common mode of punishment at the time. And they all had vivid images in their minds of people who had taken up their crosses only to die on them. For those who want to save their life will lose it. And those who lose their life for my sake will find it. And the lumps in the throats of the disciples started to grow. As humans, we have a problem. Well, we have lots of problems, but one in particular that relates today. When we decide that we believe in God, down through history, we then proceed to assume that the God in which we believe feels the same way we do about everything. It becomes less of a belief system and more of a way to prove that we're right about something, or everything, as the case may be. A lot of people have said this, but I like the way that Mark Twain put it when he said, "God created man in his own image, and man, being a gentleman, returned the favor." All manner of things have been done in the name of God in the assumption that God was all for it. Wars, mistreatment, abuse, weaponizing our faith, oppression, anything that humans are capable of has been assigned to God's will. It's like a hammer that we use to drive our beliefs and causes to the forefront. Our belief in God becomes an excuse to feel better about what we do and who we are. It becomes a way to justify turning a blind eye to the suffering and mistreatment of our neighbors while focusing on how somehow mistreated we are. And in the case of Peter and the Jews, I can sort of understand. They were under the thumb of the Romans. Their sacred space was being invaded. They were ultimately not in charge of their own destiny. And even though they had the best of intentions, the message of Jesus largely fell on deaf ears because they had other ideas about what a Messiah should be. Let's be honest, it's much harder to do the research, to become intimately familiar with issues, to stretch yourself to see more than just your opinion, to risk being wrong, and to humbly ask and look to see where God is. Instead, we've too often already decided who is right and who is wrong, and what God thinks. And all that is left is to speak up and be God's mouthpiece. And then, like Peter, it's open mouth, insert foot. And we're standing there with no way of taking it back. And the words of Jesus ring in our ears. You have your mind set not on the things of God, but on human things. At this point, the disciples really considered themselves followers of Jesus. They were his closest friends and confidants. But Jesus raises the stakes And he says, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Deny the way they want things to be. Deny trusting in their own understanding. Deny the need to be right above all things. And deny that it is possible through doing all of these things to save our own lives. But if we lose our lives for his sake, if we take up our cross, if we begin to live not for being right, but for being with people in the tension of life, if we endeavor like Jesus to live with our attention squarely focused on the heart of God, which is squarely focused on loving people, Jesus says we will find our lives. Not save our lives, but find our lives. Just saving your life is only surviving. It's just keeping yourself alive, but finding yourself, finding your life is the process of uniting yourself with Jesus, doing what he does, loving who he loves, following the way of Christ. But make no mistake, the way of Christ leads only one place: sacrifice for your fellow humans, no matter if they are right or wrong. Is it risky? Yes. Will you be hurt? Most likely. Will it be uncomfortable and hard at times? All signs point to yes. But will you find your life? Without a doubt. After all, how do we profit if we gain the whole world but lose our lives? I believe, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that in the end, God wins. But until then, Jesus has shown us that the only way to find our lives is to give them away, one person at a time.